Hello and welcome to Dialogue. I'm Yang Rui in Beijing. Amid slowing economic recovery and rising tradeism, the Business 20 or B20 are taking the lead to unite the business community and form policy recommendations for the G20 summit to be held in Hangzhou in a few days. What are the key messages from the B20 to the G20? What important initiatives are coming from the Chinese business community, and how can the B20 facilitate the G20's goal of building an innovative, invigorated, interconnected and inclusive world economy? To talk about these issues and more, I'm very happy to be joined in the studio by Mr. Yu Ping, B20 China Sherpa, and Ms. Claire Pearson, Chair of the British Chamber of Commerce in China. But before we get started, let's look at this.
The B20, a forum for the private sector to make policy recommendations for the annual G20 summit, will be held in East China's Hangzhou in early September. This month, its working committee released the 2016 Policy Recommendation Report. It proposes an open network of governments, the private sector, universities and research institutes working together on technological innovation, economic development and employment. The Electronic World Trade Platform, a mechanism for public-private dialogue in cross-border e-trade development, is one of the most eye-catching initiatives. The new mechanism will improve the current trade framework and help small and medium-sized enterprises participate in the global economy, according to Alibaba founder Jack Ma.
EWTP is something that we will start from this year, we are on the way. The purpose is to make more people benefit from globalization.
Global trade has suffered from weak growth for 5 consecutive years. Multilateral trade systems, such as the WTO, have witnessed setbacks. The fast-growing e-commerce market is likely to give a boost to cross-border trade and reduce anti-globalization sentiments amid rising protectionism. Open trade and innovation are the business community's most recommended ways to achieve global economic recovery.
You can't blame the globalization. Globalization benefits much more than its negative impact. We need to reduce all these protectionist measures, rolling back the old ones, and reducing all this kind of small regional trading agreement, which turn out to be complicated.
Further advice includes faster infrastructure development, better global financial supervision, and a more coordinated international tax policy. Nearly 1,000 business leaders will gather in Hangzhou for the meetings.
Welcome to Dialogue, Mr. Yu. Can you brief us on the highlights of this year's B20 policy recommendations for the G20?
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Yang. It's a great pleasure to be here. There were many messages from B20 to G20. The key message is that the G20 should provide a strong leadership to boost confidence, fuel growth, and energize economy. The G20's theme is to build an innovative, invigorated, interconnected, and inclusive world economy. B20 endorses G20's theme and the approach and encourages B20 to implement commitments, past and present, for strong, sustainable, and balanced economic growth. B20 decided on 6 major topics based on extensive consultations, particularly the main theme of G20 this year.
Claire, are you impressed by the highlights?
I'm very impressed. It is an honor to be here today, Ray, and to meet Mr. Yu. You know, it's an unprecedented time in global history. There's been an unprecedented long period of low inflation. We need to find out how to get the world economy kick-started, and I think Hangzhou is just the place to do it.
Do you think the G20 in Hangzhou will be a turning point with the policy recommendations of B20?
Well, since 2010, B20 summit is being held each year as a supporting event of G20, and each year B20 will provide some recommendations to G20.
So far you've submitted up to 400 such policy recommendations.
Oh yes, yes.
What options on the table?
Well, some of the recommendations are being endorsed and accepted by the G20, and the G20 even set up some institutions to support the initiatives proposed by the B20 in the areas of infrastructure, SMEs, etc. We hope that the recommendations from B20 to G20 this year will also be endorsed and accepted by G20 as much as possible.
One of the keywords that's implied in the theme of the Hangzhou Summit, Claire, is innovation. Do you think in this particular area China has a lot more to learn from the UK?
Well, I am the chair of the British Chamber of Commerce, Ray, so I'll try and be objective, but the UK is a very innovative place. It's something that we're taught early on in our education. The one question I was told to always ask is why? And I think, therefore, the UK does have very creative industries on offer. But since I've been in China, everybody seems to be an innovator. Everybody seems to be an entrepreneur. When I'm at work, China is a transitional economy, and people are having to find new solutions to new issues while China undergoes structural reform. So I think innovation is a reciprocal word between the UK and China. I think we can both learn from each other.
The new normal of the Chinese economic development actually means economic restructuring. And to restructure the Chinese economy, I'm afraid one controversial point is the size of the state-owned enterprises. And during the years of Lady Thatcher, some key sectors of the British economy had been privatized successfully. Do you think this is a very sensitive issue, or do you really suggest that China should learn and draw inspirations from the UK in privatizing some of the some parts of the Chinese economy, so that efficiency, which is also very important in facilitating the economic recovery?
I think, Ray, you raise a very good point. I think efficiency is important, but individuality cannot be ignored. I was living in the north of England while Mrs. Thatcher made the structural reforms to the mining industry. A lot of people did not like it. But ultimately, I would say our economy has moved towards a service-driven economy for the domestic sector and is in a stronger place today. It is a difficult thing that China is about to go through, moving from a manufacturing, export-driven economy to a services-led economy focused on the domestic market. They are definitely going to have to upskill in the labour force, but I think China is already reforming its education system. I am very positive about the future here, and certainly there are lessons you can learn from the UK, and I would just say in one word: negotiate, negotiate, negotiate. Listen to the workers. What do they want to do next? How do you enable them to start their own businesses? But I already see that China is making very positive moves. If the 12th five-year plan was about developing the hardware, the infrastructure of railway and internet and road, I think the 13th five-year plan is about enabling the Chinese dream. The software of healthcare, education, and communication. And I think Hangzhou is really a case study in what can be achieved in innovation and in moving from a manufacturing to a services economy. Alibaba represents that.
But Mr. Yu, it seems the public opinions are seriously divided as to how to carry out the reform of the SOE sector, with some elites calling for more respect for the market forces instead of administrative intervention in deepening the reform. I'm talking about the SOE sector, because this reform of this sector is actually examined in the broad context of following the spirit of innovation. What do you think?
Well, SOEs play a very important role in China's economy, and I think SOEs will continue to exist and continue to play important roles. But SOEs will not perform as they used to. They need to reform. They need to adapt to the changing situations. They need to take into consideration the market rules, etc. So innovation is very important, not only for the business, for the work of the SOEs, but also for institutional establishments of the SOEs.
What are some of the bad things of the SOE that may prevent the Chinese authorities at different levels from carrying on the reform? Poor efficiency, no effective dismissal of some of the labor forces that have been made redundant. What else? Waste of resources. I mean, a lot of things have been put on the table as part of the accusation by the liberals in, pushing the government for more of such reform.
I mean, to be honest, I think structural reform will happen, but it will happen from within. I watched your women's volleyball team recently.
That's indeed a major media
I really
event.
enjoyed that.
And some scholars tend to associate the success of the women's volleyball team with the difficulties that we are facing in carrying out the reform itself.
Excellent, Ray.
In fact, Professor Li Daokui from Tsinghua University said so on social media.
Oh, he's a step ahead of me. I was just in awe of that coach. I've played a bit of volleyball. I could see people were losing their head because they were having to change their game plan every 5 minutes. That game against Brazil was phenomenal. And China, the competition's not at home, the competition's abroad. It's not about fighting within your SOE. It's about winning transactions in Africa, Middle East and South America. So I would say I learned a lot watching that coach. She was able to transform the team gently whilst drawing on a spirit of cooperation which provided a win-win for worker and sport industry.
What you said seems to suggest both the skills, diplomacy, and the will to reform the state-owned or state-run sport system, particularly in the area of a women's volleyball team. What about the private sector in terms of respecting innovation?
Well, the private sector is obviously very excited about the call by the government and possible support assistance from the government for them to go into innovation full out. You see, it's difficult for individual companies, particularly SMEs, to do good business, big business. They need support from different sources besides hard work from within. So they need a good business environment. They need fair competition. They need clean environment for doing business, etc.
We're discussing policy recommendations by B20 for G20. It sounds like tongue twist, but I'll be back in a short while. Stay with us. Welcome back. A question for both of you. Let's take a second look at the major obstacles that get in the way of carrying out the further reforms in China. Other than the leadership and determination, skills, diplomacy, whatever, what do you think are the major obstacles in carrying out reforms? Because many scholars in China associate the success in the Olympics with the adversity that we're facing in carrying out and deepening the reform, particularly of the SOE sector.
China has been conducting open and reform policy for more than 3 decades. There have been a lot of reforms, successful reforms, but the reforms in many easy areas have been accomplished or have been successful. Now, what we have in mind for reforms are deep in the structure, in the system, in the way we operate the society.
Justin Yifulin believes that developed countries can ride over financial crises through structural reform, and developing countries can remove their infrastructure bottleneck and gain opportunities for faster development. Was he talking about overcapacity and corresponding unemployment that may be made possible by reforming the SOE, particularly in areas of coal, steel, cement, which are badly needed for the building of infrastructure in the first 2 decades of China's reform.
Yeah, I think he could well be referring to overcapacity, but I think China has got strategies to deal with this. I think Belt and Road is a good example, but I also think reform of the workforce is critical. If you're to move from a manufacturing to a services economy, the key to a good services economy is the quality of your people. When I wake up in the morning, if I don't feel well, I don't go to work. I need access to a doctor at a good price. If I arrive at work and my boss says, "Boy, sort this out," and it requires some good maths, I need to have had a quality education. And let's face it, your boss never says sort this out and it's easy. He means sort it out because I haven't got time and I have to know how to think laterally. So I need an education behind me that has taught me to think in an innovative way. And then I need to get a train at lunch. Now, if that train breaks down or is slow, or I can't work on my laptop while I'm on the train, then again, we're losing money. Reform is only going to work if it's economically viable. Reform is only going to be economically viable into the SME and services sector if the hardware, the infrastructure is there. And by that, I mean a fast train, a house that is built with a decent shower. The things that workers need to turn up and work on time. And then the soft side as well, not just the hard infrastructure, the software of education and healthcare. These need to be provided to create an efficient workforce during this period of restructuring. Because when people are going through change, they need their life to be enabled and facilitated by better social services. Because I look at the times when I've not been productive at work. It's times when I've been sick, it's times when I've need to upskill, and those things, if they are available to you immediately, you're back in the workforce, you're back contributing to GDP, and you're back helping with the structural reform of your country. My feeling is software meets hardware.
G20 actually came into being in the wake of the financial crisis in the year 2008 to hopefully replace what G7 had been doing. But it seems most of the emerging markets are facing a decline of the economy. And therefore, with the impact of the Leave campaign in the UK, Angela Merkel, Prime Minister May, and their Italian counterpart were meeting to discuss the future of the European Union. Justin Yifulin said major obstacles for developed nations would be further recovery from the financial crisis. Now, what do you think of the resilience of the EU economy in the wake of the British departure?
The EU as it is today cannot be the EU that it is in 5 years. The EU has got too comfortable, too bureaucratic, too slow. It's fine if we're in a different era, but now the world is moving at China speed. When I go home from China to the UK, do you know what I do? I fall asleep because life's so slow. People go home at 5, they go on holiday. It's nice, but it's not the new economic reality. I think there needs to be major structural reform in companies and in countries. The problem with Britain is that the Parliament doesn't particularly represent the people. We need to look at ways of creating a diverse Parliament to represent the diverse global nationalities that are in business. A Parliament that is mainly Caucasian really doesn't understand the emerging markets with which it has to interact to maintain its free health service and world-leading education system. So I think that, number one, we need diversity in Parliament and we need diversity in our boards. I work for a law firm. I work for the only Chinese board member on a predominantly Caucasian board. He brings insight to that board on situations like opening the Iran office or working with Moscow that really wasn't there before. We need diversity in management and flexibility in law. Employment law needs to be less parochial. When I come to China, I don't take somebody's job. I create synergies that create more jobs. It's not a zero-sum game. When a Chinese person takes a job in the UK after university, which I think they should be facilitated more ably in doing, they don't take a British person's job, they bring the know-how of a market with which we desperately need to connect post-Brexit.
Mr. Yu, what should be done to facilitate the global economic recovery? What are the most useful policy recommendations from B20 in getting the job done?
Well, the B20 this year discussed many subjects. They cover very wide range of areas like innovation, green financing, trade and investment, more employment opportunities for young people, women, etc. And the B20 really wants the G20 to take into consideration the concerns of the business people, to adopt measures, make decisions that will create a better business environment, reduce costs for the business people, create more opportunities, and make things easier for business operations in their daily work, etc. So basically, the recommendations from the B20 to G20 have to do with reducing costs, creating more business opportunities, creating a better business environment, transparency in decision making, more concern given to the SMEs, the disadvantaged people, particularly the young people, women, etc.
Claire, do you think it's time to transform major functions of G20 from just a platform into a powerful mechanism that may help facilitate the actual recovery of the world economy?
Yeah, I think this is a turning point period, and I think that permanent secretariat is desperately needed. It is very, I think it's mean to impose basically a UN weekend on a country and expect them to manage that themselves. Also, as regards execution of all the recommendations that are put forward, how are things going to be carried forward if there's not a staff? I think, it's very expensive, it's time consuming, it's troublesome, there's a lot of jet lag in the room. People will say their thing, but then what? I think the situation, the polarization between nations at the moment is at such a level that we need to take new stringent methods to create avenues for engagement that haven't previously existed. We could be moving towards a world war. This is maybe a time that we looked at new channels of communication that are more sustainable than a weekend summit.
And this has something to do with interconnectivity, which is one of the part of the subject matter of the upcoming G20 in Hangzhou. Do you believe the United States and China, the two biggest economies, are ready to cooperate to avoid further tensions in terms of, for example, negotiation or success of that about the BIT?
Well, I do believe that the two countries will cooperate because they have a lot of common interests. As far as BIT is concerned, I think there have been many rounds of discussions and they're making progress. We hope to have early conclusion of the BIT.
What are the major obstacles that prevent the two sides from reaching a consensus or even an agreement about the BIT? Trade protectionism, for example?
Well, actually, as far as I learned some time ago, the differences are narrowing. They are making progress. As for the differences, they don't want to discuss. They want to elaborate. They want to discuss between the negotiators to sort out the differences and make progress.
During the official visit of President Xi Jinping in the UK, former Prime Minister David Cameron, vowed to play a role of a bridge between the United States and Europe. I wonder if his successor, Prime Minister May, will carry on the mandate. To what degree do you think the UK will still play that unique and powerful role?
Well, to be honest, the US is still our primary foreign trading partner. We share a language, we share a lot in terms of common heritage. I still think the UK will be a useful stepping stone to the US for China. Certainly when you're in London, you meet a lot of Americans. It's easy to facilitate engagement between China and the US and broker the relationship in London. Certainly the whole world order is changing. And I think this G20 will cause people to reflect. And that's why I think that when Theresa May comes here, she may have one view of China before she takes the high-speed train from Hongqiao to Hangzhou. She may have one view of China before she visits the Alibaba campus. She may have one view of China before she meets the caliber of the organisers. But she may have another view of China when she returns. And hopefully that will unstick any problems in our bilateral relationship and also extend that to facilitating the multilateral relationship with the US.
And we believe by the time your Prime Minister is here in Hangzhou to attend the G20, President Xi Jinping will have a closed-door session about why Hinkley Point has been delayed.
I was trying to avoid that, Ray, but thanks for bringing it up.
Thank you very much for your participation in this edition of Dialogue. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Thank you.